everyone, it's Hailey, aka Hailey's Hobbies, and welcome back to my channel where I talk about my hobbies. So as you can see by today's title of the video, we are doing a what I read in June video. I read 7 books this month, well almost 7, I'm finishing up the last one today, and I only have 2 of the books that I read with me just because if you can't tell by my background, I've kind of been packing up. My lease ends on the last day of July, so I've been packing things up slowly and taking them home. I actually spent a week at home and we brought stuff home, and then when my grandma brought me up here, she took some more things home. Yeah, so it's a little bare, so I'm very sorry. Okay, so we have the book journal, so I can talk about the books that I read this month. This month I tried to read a lot of queer books because it was Pride Month and I really wanted to like read a book for every week, so there were like 4 full weeks in June, so I tried to read 4 queer novels. I read some historical fantasy and I read 2 classics actually, and yeah, so let's just get into it. The first book I read this month was The Duke Heist by Erica Ridley, and I actually wanted to read this one because the second book, The Perks of Loving a Wallflower, is actually queer. It's sapphic, which I'm really excited about and I really want to read, but I haven't been able to find it. I went to Half Price Books one day and I found The Duke Heist, which is the first book in the Wild Winchesters sort of series, and the second one is the sapphic book that I want to read. And actually I think this series is going to be like kind of a cool, diverse historical romance kind of novel like series, because the Wild Winchesters is about this group of just, I don't know if they were all orphans or something, but they all came together at a very young age and were raised by this one dude. I think there's some POC characters, and then I think one of the characters is actually disabled. I don't remember, but I think it's going to be really cool and really diverse, so I'm very excited to keep reading the series. But the first book is The Duke Heist. So essentially what happens in The Duke Heist is that you have Chloe Winchester, who is kind of like the forgettable person in the family. No one really remembers her. Her family remembers her, but people kind of outside just pass over her all the time. They don't remember her, and so this makes her perfect for a heist. There was this painting that they had that like is like a family portrait essentially, or what they consider a family portrait, and they love it to death, and it got stolen by a duke's family, and so they want to get it back. And so it takes you through this little Duke heist, and what happens is that in the beginning Chloe accidentally abducts the Duke by accident, and it kind of takes you through their relationship and sort of to like get the painting that she is trying to get for her family. There's kind of like a it's not fake dating, but it's one of the tropes where the guy like helps the girl to like get a date and stuff and like ends up falling in love with her. So it was really cute and I did really like it, and it read not like the historical romances. I feel like there's like 2 genres of historical romances. There's like the older generation and then like the younger generation, and it felt like a younger generation because I think the author's a bit younger, so there was like a lot of with like consent, which was lovely, because a lot of like other historical romances that I feel like are written by older authors don't really do consent very well, if at all. And I felt like there was I felt like it was really good for this. I wasn't expecting to like this as much, but I did really like it. I think I gave it 4 stars maybe. And yeah, also the guy, the Duke, he is trying to like kind of regain his like reputation, because his father just was really not like a good dude and kind of like didn't like gambled a lot, I think, or just like lost a lot of money and just did not have a good reputation. And so the Duke, now the son, is trying to like clean up the reputation and stuff, and he needs to marry someone with money, but he finds himself falling for Chloe, so it's really sweet. And you have this battle of like, do I marry for duty or do I marry for love? And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good premise. I don't really know what else to say. I read this like at the beginning of June. But yeah, so I'm really excited to continue with the series. I decided to just to read the first one I only wanted to read the second one, but I figured that the first one would be good to read because it's just one book away from the second book, if that makes sense. And I actually think it would probably be a bit easier to read the books in order, maybe, or at least like read the first one so you're kind of introduced to the world and the characters and stuff, because I feel like the first one is really good at explaining a lot of like the family dynamics and kind of setting up for like the second book if you do want to read like the sapphic one, which I do want to read. So yeah, that was the Duke Heist by Erica Ridley. And then the second book that I read in June was A Room with a View. I loved this book. This is a classic by E.M. Forster. Essentially you have Lucy and her chaperone, what was it, like Pear or something? I don't know, she has like a chaperone, Miss Bartlett, yeah. They end up going to Italy to do some sightseeing, and that is where you kind of meet like a couple different people. You meet, is his name Edward? No, why did I think Edward? That's a different book. But you meet like George Emerson and his dad, and they're kind of like a bit of an outcast in society. They have a lot of like forward-thinking thoughts, so a lot of people are just kind of like, they're not very like suitable company to be around, and Edward is quite passionate, actually. He's very much like heartfelt and just thinks with his heart. And then eventually Lucy and her chaperone leave Italy, and that is where they meet Cecil Weiss, who is kind of like the opposite of Edward. He's very much like a rule person, and he kind of doesn't, kind of really just tones down Lucy a lot. And so you have this kind of play on like Sense and Sensibility, maybe a little bit, and so it's just kind of who will Lucy pick, and it's very satirical. It kind of ends very like satisfyingly, which I really love, and so I really love this. I actually wanted to read this because Emma from Emmy Reads read it, and she said she really liked it, and so I just picked it up on a whim, and I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did. I ended up giving it a 4 stars just because part 1, it's split into 2 parts. Part 1 for me was just a little bit boring. Not boring, but like it was a bit more of a drag to get through. Part 2 was a blast, and there's this wonderful lake scene that I really liked. If you know, you know. And yeah, so I'm very excited to pick up other things from E.M. Forster. The third book that I read in June was Found Your Side. This was actually the first one of my queer like little readathon that I did. So this book is by Robert Jackson Bennett, and I got this one from Barnes & Noble. You'll probably have seen it in my summer book haul. This was really good. I had no idea what to expect going into it just because I had never heard of it before, but I really loved it. I gave it 4 stars. So essentially you have Sanchia. She is a thief, and she gets this job to steal like this magical tech kind of thing. The Found Your Side world is more of a magical tech kind of world. You can take an item and scribe it, so essentially write on it these commands to kind of change its reality. So you can like get like a stone and get another stone, and then put writings on one of the stones that like says you are this stone and you need to be reunited with your stone. And so then this stone that has the writings on it like believes that it is this stone even though it's not, and it'll like whoosh, go to the stone. So it's a really cool like world, and there's like so many different like things that they do with that. Like there's like you can like scribe carriages so that way they pull without horses. It's really cool, and I just love that little world of like magical tech. And so essentially Sanchia steals a magical tech item that can basically, that is just a really important tech item, and so people come after her, and so she has to like form relationships and like allyships, and it's about kind of unraveling like who is responsible for like bringing this magical device, and like how can they stop like the evil that's like occurring at the same time. and all this stuff, and I am so sad about the ending. It made me so sad, but I feel like it kind of made sense, but also I'm hoping that maybe they'll fix it. I don't know. But I did really love it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I gave it like a no, I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, I did really love it. It's actually part of a series, which I didn't know. So I definitely want to pick up the 2nd and the 3rd book eventually. But it was just really cool. I thought it was so creative, and it's such a different world to like a standard like fantasy book, I guess. And it is a slightly sapphic, so that's good for that's lovely. So that was like the first book that I kind of read for my Pride Month kind of stuff. So yeah. For my 4th book, the 4th book that I read in June was also part of my little Pride Month thing, and that was The Trials of Apollo, the first book, The Hidden Oracle. I've tried to read that book like 2 or 3 times, and I just never got into it, and I was like, you know what, I think, you know, I'm just like too young now to be reading it. No, it has some, I'm not too young. I just was reading it too fast, I think, and like, Apollo is very grating in the first, in the first kind of half of the novel, and I was like, you know what, Hailey, you're going to read this more slowly, and you're going to accept that Apollo is annoying for the time being. And I ended up really loving it. So if you don't know, the Trials of Apollo are about Apollo. Essentially, it takes place after the Heroes of Olympus series, which I kind of wanted to start back from Percy Jackson and reread everything and then go into Trials of Apollo, because there's actually it follows right up essentially like 6 months after the Heroes of Olympus series, and there's a lot of characters that he pulls from that, and like a lot of events that the author kind of mentions again, and I feel like it would have been good to like reread everything beforehand. But anyway, essentially Apollo is cast down onto Earth as a human boy. I think he's like 16. His name's like Lester Pampa something. He has this like massive like last name. I think it's like Greek or something. And so Apollo basically has to try and be a god again, and at the same time there's all these things happening with the oracles. They're not working properly, and so he's trying to figure out like how to fix these oracles so that way you can tell the future, because the oracles are all about prophecies, and if you don't have an oracle you can't get a prophecy and nothing happens. But yeah, I really liked it. It kind of put me back into like the Percy Jackson world, and it was just so wonderful. And Apollo is actually queer. I think he might be bi or pan, but he mentioned like a few times like, I've had girlfriends and I've had boyfriends, and then like he was so sad about one of the boyfriends that died, Hyacinthus. But it was just so beautiful. I just love that like you got like hints of that throughout the novel. I thought that was really great. You get Will and Nico, and then there's like a surprise character at the end that was really exciting. That made me so excited to like keep reading. You get hints of Percy throughout the book as well, but you see a lot of development throughout the novel of Apollo's character, and I felt like it was a very like natural progression, because you still get kind of a lot of his arrogance towards the end of the novel, but definitely it's toned down a lot and kind of through like a different viewpoint, which I thought was really good. And so I think I also gave this 4 stars, but I kind of just want to give it 5 because I really loved it, just for like the nostalgia. And I definitely want to keep reading the series, but I do want to do a whole reread of Percy Jackson and then the Heroes of Olympus. Fun fact, I actually don't have the physical copies of Percy Jackson because I read them on a Kindle when like Kindles first came out, and so they're all on my little old Kindle from like 2007 or whatever year it's from. I do have all the OG copies of Heroes of Olympus though. My mom would buy them the day that they'd come out, and I would read them in a day, and then I'd have to wait like a year for the next one to come out, which was always really frustrating. But I have all of them, and I think that's like one of my favorite series of like all time, because I just adore that series. But yes, that was The Hidden Oracle. And then the 5th book that I read in June was also part of my little Pride Month kind of story, and it was So This Is Ever After. This is a really inclusive novel. I feel like there's a lot of different like sexualities that kind of come up, and it's just really cute. Essentially you have Eric, and it takes place like after like saving the world, because normally you have fantasy books that take place up until saving the world, you know, but this takes place after. So King Eric has defeated like the evil king, and so then Eric and his like little friends need to go find the princess so she can kind of reclaim the throne and all will be happy. But in the meantime, Eric kind of assumes the throne just as like a precaution, and while trying to find the princess, and like they were like, this is literally going to be for a few hours while we go get her. It's just so like no one else comes and creep into power, you know. Well, turns out the princess died. She's dead. She's done. And so Eric is like, what the heck? And so he like tries to take the crown off, but alas, he cannot because there is a curse. And essentially he needs to find a soulmate by the time he is 18, or he will wither away into nothing. And there's no way to like overcome this. He can't just like give up the crown. He can't abdicate. It's death or soulmate, one or the other. And so Eric has a couple, like him and his friend group that saved the world. Eric is like, I'm gonna woo one of my friends to be my soulmate, and we're gonna do this, right? And so he goes to each friend one by one and tries to like kind of, you know, see if romance is there. And yeah, it's really cute. There's a sense of franticness because he only has 3 months before he turns 18, so he's trying to get a soulmate, and you know, he's trying to do it with his friends just because he knows them, but you know, is romance there, is romance not? And yeah, and so it's just a really cute story. I loved it so much. There is like some poly representation. It's very like brief and like short and just kind of in passing. There's like a sapphic relationship that I just adore with my whole heart. Oh, there is a non-binary character as well, which was really cool. So there's just like a lot of like kind of queer representation in this book, which I thought was really great. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I did really love it, and yeah. And I feel like it's very much like a cozy fantasy kind of thing. I mean, it definitely has like kind of high stakes. Well, not, I don't know. I feel like it's not crazy, you know, because like one book that I read, Legends and Lattes, that's kind of like, you know, the kind of like cozy fantasy that everyone recommends, but like it kind of borders on the line of like being too cozy and like nothing happening. Whereas I feel like this one, So This Is Ever After, is a perfect line between like some stakes and coziness, like having stakes but them not being like the end of the world stakes, you know. So yeah, I really loved it, and yeah, it made me happy. My roommate actually gave me this book, so that was very nice of them. So then the 6th book that I read in June was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. So I filmed a whole video on this. I don't know when it'll be up. It'll probably be a little bit, but I decided to read Sense and Sensibility, and I loved this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. It was like the fates aligned and was like, Hailey, you're gonna read this book now and you're gonna love it. Every aspect of it will be perfect. I don't know what happened. It was. So it was just beautiful, and I think I loved it so much because I had no idea what I was getting into when I read it, because I feel like with the other Austens that I've read, I have known kind of going into it like who ends up with who and sort of like the storyline, like Pride and Prejudice. But I had no idea going into this what to expect, and it was wonderful. I was mind blown so many times. So I have a video of me reading this, which does have spoilers, so watch at your own risk, but I'll just give you all a little brief blurb without spoiling it. So Sense and Sensibility is about 2 sisters, Marianne and Eleanor. Marianne is sort of like the sensibility part of the novel. She's much more romantic and outgoing and just very like emotional, whereas Eleanor is more of the sense. She kind of is more reserved and doesn't really express her emotions as much as her sister, and tries to like caution her sister not to be so like, not to have all of her emotions like on her face, I guess, or like her heart on her sleeve, you know. And so it is about them, and of course they're like romantic relations, as all Jane Austen novels are. So we have a couple different love interests, and just things go so insanely with them. Like I I had no idea what I was getting into when I expected it, or when I started reading it, because I had never heard anything about this novel before. Well, I had, but I hadn't heard like any spoilers, so this was just wonderful, and I loved it so much. And I actually tabbed it. This was my first time tabbing a book. Well, that's a lie. I tabbed Gideon the Ninth, but I hated those tabs so much because they were super thin, like a third of the size of these tabs, or like a third of the width, I guess, and it just looked ugly and I hated it, so it threw me off of tabbing for a long time. But then I was just like, I really want to tab this, and so I bought just like a bunch of different tabs off Amazon, and I think these are such good tabs for tabbing because I feel like they're good, like the best size. I just annotated the crap out of this. I talk more about my annotating system in the video about this, so whenever that's out, if you want to look at the annotating like of it, you can like check out like the beginning of the video. I'll try and do like chapters in that video, but anyway, I adored this so much, and I laughed so much, and I was like so in shock for a lot of this book, and it was just so good. And I just love how I have annotated it. Like I have like at the beginning of the book my like predictions for like romances and like who will end up with who, and it was just lovely. I don't know why, but like everything was just perfect when I read this book, and I feel like that really affected my reading experience and why I gave it 5 stars. And so I think this is actually my new fave Jane Austen novel. I don't know, I would like to reread all of Jane Austen's like 6 main novels before I kind of come up with a ranking. I still need to read Mansfield Park. That one actually has a lot of like mixed opinions, I think, on it, so we'll see if I love that one. But I definitely think this takes probably the top spot, if not the second. So yeah, so that was the 6th book I read, and then the 7th book, which I'm in the process of finishing up today, is the last book for my Pride little readathon, and that is the Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. I have been looking for this book forever, and I could never find it in Barnes & Noble. I do live in College Station, so that's probably why. But I managed to find it in half-price books, down at the bottom shelf, and I snatched it up. And I'm really enjoying this so far. I think it's going to be like a 3.5 star read, maybe. This definitely kind of writes like the older generation author, like I was talking about with the Duke Heist. You have the younger and the older is kind of what I've seen, and this definitely feels more of a younger or an older author, just in the way it's written and sort of with like these spicy scenes, if you will. Yeah, but it is full of consent, which is really nice, and I think it's a fun concept. So essentially, The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics is about Lucy. Oh my gosh, that's what Lucy in a Room with a View. So you have Lucy, who kind of is getting off of like the breakup of her ex-lover. Her ex-lover ends up marrying a guy, and Lucy is just kind of like heartbroken, and so she gets a letter from this Countess, Catherine, saying, hey, I'm looking for someone to like translate this like French like astronomy book for this society. Do you happen to know anyone of like your father's correspondence? Because Lucy's dad was very like a big astronomy scientist person, and Lucy actually did a lot of the math and like just a lot of the stuff actually for her dad, where her dad was kind of more like the theoretical part of it. And so Lucy is like, LOL, I can do it. And so she goes to live with the Countess, and the Countess's name is Catherine, and Catherine that isn't really a sciencey person. She loves like embroidery though, and she is kind of like, she's not a very sciencey person because her husband, who was also a scientist and would correspond with Lucy's dad, he was just not like a good man to her, and science was always first before Catherine, and so she has a lot of trauma with that. And so but she's like, oh, who's this woman that turns up at my door? It's Lucy. And so they find themselves longing for each other. And so while Lucy spends her days interpreting the complicated French text, she spends her nights falling in love with the alluring Catherine. But sabotage and old wounds threaten to sever the threads that bind them. Can Lucy and Catherine find the strength to stay together, or will they be doomed to be star-crossed lovers? So there's a lot of like astronomy, kind of science-y kind of vibes and like metaphors and like similes and imagery in this book, and it's just a good time. And I'm really enjoying it actually. I feel like the romance did kind of jump in so like very, very quickly, but I feel like that's kind of like the case with a lot of these like romance, like historical romances. They kind of just jump into the romance, which is fine. It's just kind of felt very fast because it was within like the first like 70 something pages, and I was just kind of like, whoa. But yeah, that is The Lady's Guide of Celestial Mechanics, and I'm just going to be finishing that up today. I have about 100 pages left, I think, and that will be my 7th book for June, and also my completed Pride readathon, Prideathon, queerathon that I made up. So yeah, anyway, that is everything that I read in May, in June actually, not May, and yeah, I am excited for July. I am kind of limited in my books for July just because I packed up most of them and took them home, and so I really only have a couple books here with me, and I don't know, maybe it'll be time to start Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson, because I definitely need to get onto that. It's so daunting. Anyway, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!